The 7th of December, 1941, 7:55 a.m. The first of two waves of Japanese naval aircraft, launched from 6 aircraft carriers, attacked Pearl Harbor, catching the US forces completely by surprise. While the attack costs only 29 Japanese planes, 2,400 US sailors and soldiers are killed, and 1,200 are wounded. Over half of the military aircraft are damaged or destroyed, almost all of which had been grounded at the time. Adolf Hitler applauds the attack and declares war on the United States, even though the United States only declared war against Japan. On the 6th of June, 1944, under the codename Operation Overlord, US, British, and Canadian troops cross the English Channel and land on the beaches of Normandy in France. By the end of June, more than 850,000 troops would come ashore on the beaches of Normandy. However, thousands of them would be captured by the Germans, and roughly 94,000 Americans would be held as prisoners of war in the European theater. Some of them, risking their own lives, would have the courage to stand up to the Nazis, thus saving the lives of their fellow prisoners. One such man is Roddie Edmonds. Roderick Waring Edmonds was born on the 20th of August, 1919, in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the United States of America. He was born as one of 4 brothers, and his parents nicknamed him Roddie. The Second World War began on the 1st of September, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Roddie Edmonds enlisted in the US Army on the 17th of March, 1941. Most Americans hoped the United States would remain neutral, but between 1939 and 1941, however, the US slowly began to support the Allied powers amid ongoing debates between isolationists and interventionists. Isolationists wanted the United States to stay out of the war and focus on the defense of the Western Hemisphere instead. By contrast, interventionists favored proactively assisting Great Britain, even if it meant entering the war. Japan's bombing of Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, 1941, ended this debate. Pearl Harbor was the most important American naval base in the Pacific and home to the US Pacific Fleet. At 7:55 a.m. on the 7th of December, 1941, the first of two waves of Japanese naval aircraft, launched from 6 aircraft carriers, attacked Pearl Harbor, catching the US forces completely by surprise. 2,400 US sailors and soldiers were killed, and 1,200 wounded. Over half of the military aircraft were damaged or destroyed, almost all of which had been grounded at the time of the attack. Of the US battleships present, all were hit, and 2, the Arizona and Oklahoma, were completely destroyed. However, the Japanese assault failed. At the time of the attack, the most important ships in the US fleet, the aircraft carriers, were not present, as they were away on maneuvers, and US oil supplies, the submarine fleet, and repair facilities remained undamaged. While the all-important battleships had sustained heavy damage, all but 2 were eventually refloated, repaired, and returned to service. The Japanese rationalized the attack as retribution for the military and economic support from the US to the Chinese Republic, and for the economic sanctions against Japan that shortly followed. In addition, in summer and fall 1941, the United States froze Japanese assets and placed an embargo on oil exports to Japan. The United States quickly declared war on Japan in response to the attack, and Adolf Hitler responded by declaring war on the United States 4 days later, on the 11th of December, even though the United States had only declared war against Japan. Today, historians see this declaration as one of the greatest errors in Hitler's judgment. On the 6th of June, 1944, under the codename Operation Overlord, US, British, and Canadian troops crossed the English Channel and landed on the beaches of Normandy in France. This operation became known as D-Day and was the largest amphibious invasion in history, deploying more than 160,000 Allied troops on air, land, and sea. 50,000 vehicles, some 5,000 naval craft, and more than 11,500 aircraft supported the initial invasion. 2.5 months later, Paris was liberated. Although D-Day was key to the overall Allied victory in World War II, it came too late in the war to make a significant difference in the fate of Europe's Jews. More than 5 million had already been killed by this time. Roddie Edmonds arrived in the combat zone as a Master Sergeant of the 106th Infantry Division, 422nd Infantry Regiment, on the 10th of December, 1944. 6 days later, on the 16th of December, the German military launched the Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive, which was the last major German military offensive campaign in Western Europe. Hitler hoped that the German counterattack would surround the British and American armies and stall the Allied offensive against Germany. However, the German offensive in the Ardennes region of Belgium was only temporarily successful in halting the Allied advance. Despite taking dreadful losses, US forces managed to delay the enemy sufficiently to permit reinforcements to be moved into position to halt the German drive. On the 19th of December, 1944, during the battle, Edmonds and other American soldiers were captured, thus becoming prisoners of war. The prisoners were forced to march for 4 days in the bitter cold to a railway station. Some prisoners died on the way. At the station, they were loaded into boxcars and driven, without food for several days, to Stalag IX-B, a camp near Bad Orb, where the Jewish prisoners of war were segregated into special barracks with lice-infested mattresses and starvation food rations. Edmonds and the other prisoners were more fortunate and were taken to Stalag IX-A, the nearby camp of Ziegenhain in Germany. A Stalag camp was a German term used to describe a prisoner of war camp. The other, lower-ranking prisoners of war were sent to slave labor camps. As the senior, non-commissioned officer at the new camp, Master Sergeant Edmonds was responsible for the camp's 1,292 American prisoners of war. Sometime in January 1945, the Germans announced that all Jewish prisoners of war in Stalag IX-A camp were to report the following morning. Roddie Edmonds and his men were well aware that the Germans were murdering the Jews. They therefore understood that the order to separate the Jews from the other prisoners meant that the Jews were surely in great danger. Master Sergeant Edmonds, who was in charge of the prisoners, ordered all of them, Jews and non-Jews alike, to stand together. 1,292 prisoners of war were standing in a wide formation in front of the barracks. When the German officer in charge saw that all the camp's inmates were standing, he rushed up to Edmonds in a fury and said, "They cannot all be Jews." The Nazi officer then placed his pistol against Edmonds' head and demanded that he identify the Jewish soldiers under his command. But to this, Edmonds responded, "We are all Jews." The German again threatened Edmonds, but the Master Sergeant did not waver and retorted, "According to the Geneva Convention, we have to give only our name, rank, and serial number. Religion is not required. If you shoot me, you will have to shoot all of us, and after the war, you will be tried for war crimes." After the exchange, which was all in English, the German gave up, turned around, and left the scene. One of the witnesses to the exchange was Lester Tanner, who had also been captured in the Battle of the Bulge. Tanner had been inducted into military service in March 1943 and had trained in Fort Jackson. Master Sergeant Edmonds was the highest-ranking non-commissioned officer in the 422nd Infantry Regiment, and Tanner remembered him well from his training period, saying, "He did not throw his rank around. You knew he knew his stuff. And he got across to you without being arrogant or inconsiderate. I admired him for his command. We were in combat on the front lines for only a short period, but it was clear that Roddie Edmonds was a man of great courage, who led his men with the same capacity we had come to know of him in the States. Because Edmonds' men trusted him, they followed him even on that day, no matter what the consequences." The US Army's standing command to its ranking officers in prisoners of war camps is that you resist the enemy and care for the safety of your men to the extent possible. Master Sergeant Edmonds, at the risk of his own immediate death, bravely defied the Germans with the unexpected consequence that the 200 Jewish prisoners were saved. Roddie Edmonds also kept a diary in the camp, where he also had other prisoners of war write down their names and addresses. As food rations were very small and the prisoners were very hungry, Edmonds, with some other friends, planned to open a restaurant after the end of the war. Edmonds, who was artistically talented, made drawings of the restaurant and sketched its logo. Towards the end of the war, with the Allied forces converging, the Nazis started to evacuate the camp and march the prisoners deeper into Germany. Once again, Roddie Edmonds' courage was responsible for saving the lives of his men. He told his men that when the march begins, everyone should break rank, eat grass, or otherwise make themselves sick, and run back to the barracks, those who were not ill assisting those who were. And his daring plan worked. Though the Germans threatened them and roughed them up, Roddie and his men stayed the course all day. Finally, as the sun was setting, the commandant threw his hands in the air and said to Roddie, "Okay, you win. We give up. You can have the camp. "We're leaving." After 100 days of captivity, Edmonds returned home. However, plans to open his restaurant were abandoned. Edmonds was then recruited again during the Korean War. After returning home from Korea, he worked variously for the Knoxville Journal and in sales related to mobile homes and cable television. He never either told his family of the event at the prisoner of war camp during World War II, nor received any official recognition, citation or medal for his defense of the Jewish prisoners of war. Roddie Edmonds was 65 years old when he died on the 8th of August, 1985. However, after his death, Edmonds' wife gave his son Chris Edmonds a couple of the diaries his father had kept while in the prisoner of war camp. Chris Edmonds, a Baptist minister, began researching his story. He located several of the Jewish soldiers his father had saved. He provided witness statements to Yad Vashem, Israel's official memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. On the 10th of February 2015, Yad Vashem recognized Roddie Edmonds as righteous among the nations, Israel's highest honor for non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. The awards ceremony was held on the 27th of January 2016 at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., where the then-President Barack Obama praised Edmonds for action above and beyond the call of duty and echoed Edmonds' statement of solidarity with the Jews. Chris Edmonds, Roddie's son, received the Righteous Medal and Certificate of Honor from Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer and Yad Vashem Council Chairman Rabbi Law on his father's behalf at the ceremony. On the 15th of April 2021, congressional leaders recommended Master Sergeant Roddie Edmonds, who saved more than 200 Jewish prisoners from certain death, for the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the two highest civilian awards in the United States. For the third time, it was not passed by Congress. The Edmonds family needs all Americans to help get it passed. Please call or write your senator or congressman, letting them know it is long past time to honor Roddie Edmonds as a great American hero. There were many tears shed for Roddie Edmonds.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel, and don't miss our next videos. Click the subscribe button now for more interesting clips. Give us a like, and see you in the following episode.